Next up, we've got the GUI. So let's go into our API and get started with that. We're just going to type in GUI, G-U-I. And if we look at our API, we've got a handful of different GUI options. In fact, we've got a lot of GUI options if you scroll down there. The first one, though, is let's just start off with the GUI class. We can go inside of here, and we can find out we've got a lot of information, things about the skin color, background color, content color. We've got our class functions in here, different functions we can use. And those are mostly what we're going to want to use. If we look down here, we've got everything from begin and end groups. We can set groups. We can do scroll views. We can toggle toolbars. We've got text areas. Lots of really good stuff to set up those basic GUI functionalities. What we want to do is we want to just start with the basics. You know, this is the first time using this class, so we don't want to go too crazy with it. We just want to be able to display the information that we want. And to display that information, we've got a couple of options. We've got a way of bringing in textures with it. We can do buttons with it. We can do text fields. We can also have a nice simple one. We just got our label. And the label basically says what? It says make a text or texture label on screen. So we're able to load up text or a texture and print it on the screen. So let's click on that one and see what the function calls for. So we go down here, we can see that we've got our functions. We've got it for a text, for an image, the content, the text style, the image style, and the content style. So we've got a lot of extra things we could pull in if we wanted to, but what we want to start with is just this simple. We simply want to say, okay, let's pull in some text, write out some information, and then paste our variable for our score into this. So if we continue on down, we find that we've got some of the parameters. Those parameters for the position, the rect. This is a rectangle that we're going to draw on screen. This is how big our shape's going to be, the rectangle on screen to use for the label. We've got the text, what type of text to display the inside of that label we create. An image if we're going to load it. But the main things we're going to stick with is just our position and just our text file. So let's look on down, and one of the nice things is we've got plenty of examples in here. And the first two, nice and simple. We've got a function on GUI, so we have a GUI.label, and then we have the rectangle, the starting position, how far over to go, how far down to go, and then what to put inside of that. And in here we've got a nice simple example of how to get the texture image in there and where to place that texture image. Okay, so we want to do the same basic thing right in here. We're just simply going to be printing out to the screen. It's our first time. We're not really going to load any information into it yet. We just want to print something to the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and drop in here. We're going to say a function, and what do we have? It's an on GUI. And there's no arguments in there. We'll go ahead and drop down. So on this, in this on GUI function, we're going to be using the GUI class, and we're going to be using the GUI.label. So we'll do GUI.label, and then inside of this function we have a rect for the rectangle, and inside of that we're doing what? We're saying where are we going to be placing this label that we're about to create. We're going to place it 10 pixels over, 10 pixels down, and 100 pixels over and 20 pixels down. So we're going to go ahead and say same basic parameters. And we're going to do comma. And our next little piece of this, we can type in some information. And we're going to go ahead and just say score, skip a space, semicolon on the end. And that should set us up to print out that basic information to get started with. So let's go on back over to Unity. If we've got no error messages, you'll notice that inside of the game view we don't see any information until we actually hit play. When we hit play, then we're going to get our GUI information. There we go. So we've got score being printed to the console for us, and that's fantastic, or to the game screen, excuse me. And now what we want to do is actually tie in some the actual variable to this. So let's go ahead and hit stop on that one. We'll go back to our own GUI right in here. And on this one, we're simply going to do plus. We can just do plus so that we're adding in the additional information that we want, and that's going to be our score. So we'll save that out. We'll go back over to our game, and we'll hit play. And now as we start shooting stuff, there we go. We've got score 1, score 2. And if we can shoot a couple of objects, there we go. So you can see our score is being updated. It's giving that visual feedback to the player so the player knows that they're making progress. And we'll go ahead and hit stop on that one. And we're looking pretty good. That gives us a nice piece of information for the user. Now, the next thing we could do is we can also put up there how many lives does the player have. Because if we'll go back to the player up here has a number of lives. So let's say we add in the additional information for that one. So again, it's our GUI.label, our rectangle. Now this time, we've got to figure out where do we want it to go. So we're saying, are we 10 over? And if you're wondering where exactly how we know where this goes, and this goes, just click on the rect, and the rect's going to tell you the structure that it has for it. So we have our left, our top, our width, and our height. So when we're filling this in, we've got our left, we've got our top, and it's just saying from the left, from the top. So 10 over, and if we went 10 down, 20 down from there, then we can go down, let's say 30. We'll see where we go from there. Actually, we'll go about 25. And how far over? 100 seems like enough to fit our text into. And then from there, how far down? Let's say we went 25, we'll go 35. And we'll print out lives. And we're going to add in not any information just yet because we haven't passed any information in yet. But we'll go ahead and put in a variable for right now. And we'll say our lives. Save that one out. Go back into Unity. Let's see where our text ends up. There we go. So we've got just enough space in between the two of them. We've got score, we've got lives. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to add one more in there for our timer because we're going to have one counting down the time for the game. So we'll go back in, we're going to add one more GUI. So GUI.label, rectangle, and this time we could go further over. We could just keep it as one running line if we wanted to. We could take it to the bottom of the screen if we wanted to. So it just sort of depends on where you want to take some of this information. And if we go back into here and we say, okay, well, how do we put it to the right, to the left, or centered on the screen? One of the things that we have in here is see also for our GUI tutorial. So if you go into the GUI tutorial, this is going to be a great resource when you're starting off. And it talks about how to set up each button. It talks about how to set up each and every piece of the GUI that Unity provides. We have an example level loader. We have all kinds of great information just to get you started. We have things for top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right. How do we set it up so that it goes to those spots on the screen? Setting up so that we say, well, what's my screen width? And then minus what to get me to where I want to be. So let's say we came in here and said, well, let's just kind of use that little piece of code. That sounds good. We'll take something on the right-hand side over there. So if we come into here and we say, okay, now we don't really want it to be a box because we're still using a label. So we're just going to use our rectangle, and we're saying what? We're saying our screen width, and that screen width is set inside. And then we've got our minus what? We're going to come from the right over 100, and then Off the top, we'll come down 10, 100 over from there, and then we'll say about 20 down from that one. Instead of top right, we'll go ahead and say this is our counter. We'll go ahead and add in our little piece that we need, just our game time. So here you can see where we can take from some of the stuff that's already done. If you really get in and start poking around all of the API, you're going to find a lot of great information in there. So it's worth reading over once, twice, 3 times just to get it all down. So let's save that. Let's see what it does. We just copy-pasted where we think it might work. And when we look in here, we go, aha, it does work. It works really well for us. It basically just took the screen width. We subtracted 100, so it pulls us all the way over to 100 here. If we wanted to go back over a little bit, we could pull back on the subtraction. Now, if you're having trouble trying to find placement for things, then you can also take these and pull them out as a variable. So let's say, just for instance, we'll do one quick little trial here, and then you can tie things in the way you want to. We'll say we'll call this our label right. We'll make it a float equals, let's say, 100. And we'll go back into here, and we're going to take this 100 out. We'll save that. And this time when we come back into the editor, we've got our label right at 100. If we hit play, we could go into our inspector, and now we could actually slide this around left to right. That way we could get just the right placement and not have to play back and forth with a lot of numbers, but just expose it as an inspector option. And we look like 75 looks like a real good number right in there. So we see we like 75. Now when we hit stop, the label right turns back to 100. So we just have to make sure that we set it 75 here. Or if we know 75 is good, then we can just come back into here, hard code it back in, and then not worry about this variable. But we can use that variable anytime we want, just to plug back into any number so that we can find just the right placement. It's a nice little way of working around the sort of the lack of some of the functionality that the GUI offers. Alright, so let's save that guy. Let's make sure we're updated. There we go. Save out our scene file. Hit play. Make sure everything looks good. Our GUI is up. The 75 looks good at the counter. Our scoring works. So the next thing we need to do is just add in some additional functionality for the lives and some functionality for the counter. And we'll take care of those two things next.